Well, gee, Charles, anything happening that you want to talk about?
Not much, not much.
Pretty wild.
It's great to be back in HQ.
Yep.
Art department once again has outdone itself, focusing on the Goof of Wall Street.
Exactly.
Actually, I think I may have told you once about this, but before I met you, somebody was suggesting that I ought to try to experiment and see if I could come in as an extra in a movie or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I answered one of those casting calls on Craigslist. I went to the place, and it was for this movie, in theory. What happened was there was a long line of people, and I went in a very fancy suit, looking like a Wall Street gangster. And of course, they said, "Oh yeah, we want to talk to you," and got me in to talk to the lead casting person or whatever. And that person said, I think you could really do well in this part, but if you want to have a long-term career, I happen to have this acting school,
right.
And I have this picture, the casting pictures you need to do, and the whole package will just set you back, $2,700. Are you interested?
This is a standard trick, Charles. I can't tell you how many actresses I knew in LA who would tell me a story about this modeling agency or that modeling agency that were actually escort services trying to,
Sure. But this was pathetic, actually. And I think the movie was actually rather bad as well. But
oh, I like that movie. And, funny story, a lot of the guys that worked at Stratton Oakmont came from my high school.
Huh.
And I reconnected with some unrelated high school people years later. Social Engineers did a story about some involvement I had with a production company in LA called Bricktop Productions, which I just became a consultant to them and was on there or whatever. But those guys told me a story about one of their friends who had worked at Stratton Oakmont, went to the same kind of casting call that you did, and he happened to mention that he was wearing the tie that he wore on the first day of work at Stratton Oakmont. And this guy became not only an extra, I think he had some speaking lines in it, and he became a direct consultant to Martin Scorsese about the midget bowling.
Is that right?
He said, no, it was nothing like this. Much more midgets, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's,
that line is interesting, and I think our audience knows that I worked at Dillon Reed for about almost 11 years, from 1980 till 1991. And that was in a very different bygone age. We had quite a reputation for being conservative and strict, and we stayed away. Indeed, Nick Brady, who was the chair and became Treasury Secretary, I remember he was sitting around and one of our clients was attacked by Mike Milken and Drexel Burnham. And he was pissed because they had basically gone and broken all kinds of laws. And it was a requirement that you couldn't accumulate that much stock in a company without filing this disclosure form, which is called a 13D. And I forget what the percentage requirement was, but these bozos from Drexel said, well, okay, we'll get a loose collection of people and we'll act in concert, but we won't disclose it. And we'll walk into Dillon Reed and we'll say, we're going to take over your client because we've accumulated a third of the stock. So my memory's a bit hazy on the specifics, but my general recollection is that Nick arranged for these people to be thrown on the sidewalk and then said, how can we fucking crush this company? And he, I forget if he was in the Senate then or not. And I think he was back from the Senate because he took Harrison Wilson's, the guy who had to resign in Abscam. He took his seat.
Abscam?
You did, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he got together and he said, well, how can we really hurt these guys? And so they changed the tax law. And where before you could have accelerated depreciation on real estate, jets, and energy reserves and stuff like that, most of Drexel's clients benefited from that. And one of the reasons they changed it as abruptly as they did is they really wanted to punish this guy. And that wasn't enough. Then they wanted to put him in prison, which, in this case, Mike Milken was a thief.
And he did the whole, what did he do, penny stocks or something?
No. Junk bonds.
Bonds.
What he did, which was intellectually, on paper, interesting and pretty clever, is he did a historical study that showed in a given period in history that the returns from investing in a portfolio of lowly rated debt paper more than compensated the investor for taking the risk that you would take by not buying AAA paper or AA paper. And so the reason that story works so well is the historical time period he selected. That's one thing you always have to be very careful with when you do this type of work. I mean, if something's going on in, say, the period 1982 to 1999...
could skew your findings.
Yeah, so the choice of the endpoints is very important. Anyway, he took this idea around. He was at Wharton. He actually tried to get a job at Dillon Read out of Wharton, and he was told, no way. And then he went off, and the way he built his fortune was in the crooked days. Now he's, of course, a philanthropist doing conferences with the Clinton Foundation and others.
Oh, really?
And there's nothing to look at there, I don't think.
Huh.
Yeah, we'll be looking at that. He would say to the people who would buy these junk bonds, the accounts that would buy them, they weren't doctors and dentists as much as savings and loans, small life or property casualty insurance companies looking for a little bit of juice. He'd say to the individual executives, the individual purchasers at a bigger company, he'd have a salesman go back to them and say, hey, Jason, yeah, thanks for your order of $10 million from the institution. Have you checked your Drexel Burnham account?
It's empty.
And no. And you would say, well, I don't have a Drexel Burnham account. Oh, yes, you do. Right shortly after your company bought these bonds, we opened up a Drexel Burnham account and we acted for you, and we bought these warrants that would be paired with the junk bonds, and we just gave them to you. And you're like, wow, the guy's making $60,000, $80,000, not very much money in these small places. And he looks at his account statement and he's got a position worth $150,000.
Sounds like a trick.
Yeah, the trick is that what Milken would do is he'd go to the client, he'd say, I need to sell 100 million, or you want me to buy 100 million worth of junk bonds. To do that, you're going to have to give me warrants on 20% of your company.
Sorry, what's a warrant?
Warrants are right to buy a specific percentage or number of shares in the underlying security of a company.
At a given price.
At a given price.
Irrespective of what the market price is.
Exactly. And the longer the warrant term, the more valuable it is.
Because if you had a warrant in Amazon for $10 and it goes up to 1,000, you can still buy it for 10.
Right, exactly. But also the longer the life of the warrant, the more valuable it is. And it's not a strictly arithmetic calculation. It's very difficult to actually value these things. And so he would go, being very smart with math, he'd go to the company and say, you need to give me warrants on 20% in order to get this issue off. And they'd have a successful issue, and he'd get his 20%, but he wouldn't give the 20% to the buyer. He'd keep a whole bunch for himself and sprinkle it around to the people who had bought the securities that were arguably mispriced. And he got away with this in the period really late 70s to whenever it was that Drexel Burnham was wound up, because the Reagan economy took off, the Soviet Union fell apart, and everything went straight up. Asset values.
Wait a minute. Because weren't there also a ton of Bush sons and nephews involved in all kinds of savings and loan shenanigans? See, it seems to me, Charles...
Much smaller stuff.
Smaller stuff? But there's this nexus between Wall Street and politics, and as these guys... I mean, Paulson goes from what? Goldman Sachs to the Treasury.
Right.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on in Wall Street, and it's one of these things like what you just described is so complicated that not only do I not understand it, obviously most people could be tricked by it, and there's so many tricky tricksters who are working on tricks. Right,
and so if you have been around, if you're actually investing and not speculating, speculating, you're going to the track and you want to hear about making 10 times your money in a week. Investing, you're trying to perceive differences between the traded value of an asset and its underlying value. If you're buying long, the traditional investor, you're looking at something, you say, hey, that apartment's really undervalued. I could buy it for $200,000 and turn it around in 5 years and sell it for $1 million. That's long-term investing. Speculating is, hey, my friend Louis said that Dog Mutton Inc. is a great long.
Well, Tesla's going to come out with dry solid-state batteries.
Right, and that's an argument.
Speculating, though, isn't it?
It is speculating, but I'm talking about, you get together with a crowd, they say, well, so-and-so has always been very smart. He has a nice car, a nice house, a nice wife, and he says, buy Dog Mutton Inc. You're like, okay, I'll buy Dog Mutton Inc.
Buy it.
And he goes, oh, but no. You know,
But that's what Stratton Oakmont was all about.
I understand. That's why I bring it up. And, that's what I have to say, as we get into this a little bit, there's so much breaking news on Hunter Biden and the Biden family and the collection of crooks that's in the Uniparty feasting off the New World Order from 1988 forward, that I'd like to begin before we demolish the Biden family, saying that I really pity Hunter. I mean, I don't.
Oh yeah.
I know he thinks along the way, perhaps if he's thinking at any time, that
So where did I leave that crack pipe?
That he profited from this exercise. I mean, he got these $1 million gigs. He got who knows? I mean, I don't even want to go into the territory of underage women. Let's assume he was dating people above the age of consent who aren't blood relatives, and that may not be a safe assumption. This is a pitiful guy, and I am aware of people who have serious addiction problems and who have gotten through them.
Right.
And it is no easy thing to do. I mean, you typically addicts use whatever their potion is as a crutch to get over some historical problem that they can't reconcile one way or another. So there's a deeper root here to this fellow's painful life. And here we have, the ladies on The View and MSNBC, CNN types who say, well, you conservatives, you're not thoughtful, you're rapacious, you're assholes, we're the people who really care about the rest of humanity. I don't see much of that. I think if you really cared about Hunter Biden having gone through whatever he's gone through, you would have said to Joe, ixnay on politics, ixnay on the political life. You really, these problems that we see now probably have their root going way back maybe into his infancy. I mean, 2, 3, 4 years old. We don't know what Biden was like, Joe Biden was like as a father, early father.
Well, how about the trauma of living through the car accident that killed his mother and his baby sister? That's enough right there to put anybody over the edge for the rest of their life.
Right, or the trauma of having to get in the swimming pool with your father and watch his hair float to the surface off his legs.
Touch his legs. We didn't hear about any of the run-ins with Corn Pop.
Exactly. So
there's one more thing I wanted to mention about Stratton Oakmont, Charles, making today's poster even more appropriate. This firm was at the center of a controversy that led to the development of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230.
Oh, really?
Because there was some posting on Prodigy, some investor chat group on a precursor to the internet bulletin board service, and Stratton Oakmont wanted to sue Prodigy for allowing this unfavorable information to go out. So Congress decided it's not Prodigy's fault, it's whoever put this information on there, so you can't sue this information network just for running an information network. And this law stays on the books today. Obviously, a tiny fraction of the users that we have now on Twitter were there on Prodigy, so it's a little bit like applying a law that came about for regulating horse riding and applying it to cars or airplanes. We need an update to this law to reflect how important these things have become in modern life.
Right. I actually just earlier today was on a panel for RT, and now everybody can say, Russia. But anyway, I was on a panel and with two other commentators, I think both to the left of me, which wouldn't be hard, and we got talking about this, and I think the original premise behind exchange of information and making it free in this country under the First Amendment was ably articulated by Thomas Jefferson. He was actually the precursor to the Declaration was the Virginia Statute on Religious Liberty. And the basic principle was, rather than operating the way you did in England for a long time, where the publishers had to get the specific approval in advance of
the king?
I don't know the king himself, but elements of the government, and you get very severely punished if you tried to break. The basic premise is that everybody ought to have a right to express his or her, his opinion back then, and now his or her opinion. But and if you said something that was really stupid, there were enough people out there who would say, Ortel just said something phenomenally stupid. What an idiot is he? You'd have ye olde times or whatever would punch something out explaining what an idiot I was. And similarly in this thing, you ought to be able, there's such a presumption in the securities markets that such an advantage that the sellers of securities have, the firms like this that push them out and the companies themselves. They're always making arguments that the trees are growing to the sky and nothing's wrong with the company and this is fantastic. And there's not enough balance there of people, frankly, like me and others who stand up and say, wait a minute, I call mega bullshit on GE. I mean, this is not as advertised. And you've fallen in thrall to these big companies because they're paying you off and they're hiring the investment bank, they're deciding which analysts are preferred or not based on how positive they are in their research reports. They're paying the media off by advertising or
owning it.
Yeah, owning it or advertising everywhere. And they're paying academia off by coming up with these joint studies where they say, all right, GE will generously agree to finance your independent study of the best light bulbs that are out there. Shocker, GE are the best light bulbs out there. Isn't that amazing?
He'd be ideal for a joint study.
Exactly.
Actually, a Wall Street person just said to me yesterday, trees don't grow to the sky.
They definitely don't. Eventually they fall
Right.
down.
Okay,
Exactly.
I want to make sure I had that straight.
Right, but the trees, but actually that's sort of funny. We're going all over the place here, but when I took time off from 2002 to 2006, one of the things I did on my own is just try to read the history that I hadn't read. I started with American and then I went into English and French and others. And I happened to read through the prospectuses for the various companies that were trying to get settlers to come to the New World.
Dutch, East India.
Well, it was mostly the English ones, so there were quite a few of them. And you read them, and they would never get to, Stratton Oakmont wouldn't go as far as the New World, gold is lining around, the food is falling off the trees, the animals are so lazy you could just walk up and kill them. I mean, it was absurd. The natives are friendly, and the natives are not friendly by 1607. And so we have a long history, I guess, of saying that of people raising money, making promises to greedy investors who think they're pulling the wool over the company's eyes. I mean, that's really the funny story, frankly, about the sale of Manhattan. The residents were looking at whoever bought it, the Dutch, and saying, these idiots. First of all,
buy land.
You can't buy land. Look at the way they're dressed. I mean, they must be overheated. They're going to get sunburned. They don't want to be here anyway. We'll take their beads. We'll take their money. And so there's been a long history of that. And this goofball Hunter, and I unfortunately have had a bad experience with a similar type goofball who didn't get into crack, or as far as I know, underage relatives. But you grow up among a striving, in a family where the mother or the father, or both in the case of the Clintons, are strivers. They are not wealthy when they start, but they instantly find themselves around people who may have made their wealth in a generation, or they may have their wealth for centuries. And these politicians have the ability today, and back when Biden started his career, and the Clintons started their career, to make to really pick winners and losers. We see winners and looters.
Right.
Here we see today with the social media platforms and the internet tycoons, we see examples under Mueller, Comey, maybe under Free, of the apparatus of the state being trained against political rivals and enemies,
right,
and supporting the politicians who do all this work. In a way, Hunter didn't ask to be born. And so he entered into a crazy situation. But this is why I do not think it is a good idea as a parent to tell a child, if you know your stuff in an area, to tell a child, as my mother told me after forcing me to take piano lessons for a number of years. My mother said
pugilism.
Yeah, boxing. Yeah, that was a great idea. And unfortunately, I didn't have to enter the ring on that one. But then, I was a pencil. I was like really, really thin. And she turned to me one day and said, "Look, you're just never going to. You can't even read music. How are you going to be a musician? So you can stop."
It's constructive criticism.
She was very blunt and funny, actually. And a couple days later, she came in with a tennis racket. She goes, "Try this."
There you go.
Which I did like a lot.
And you're very good at tennis. I like it that your mother never gave up. She constantly had some.
Oh boy!
Lucky you didn't get around to ballet.
Oh no, she wouldn't have pushed that on me. But anyway, so in Hunter and in the Bidens, if we could do animation, we would have a meat grinder going, and with to count down to the debate tomorrow, because Joe Biden is going to be fed. I mean, there's going to be nothing left of him after that debate, if it happens.
Well, he said today on I didn't recognize who was talking to him, but he said, that's an absolute lie. Rudy Giuliani is a henchman. It's like, wait a minute, he's his lawyer. Right. How is he his henchman?
Well, it's like the entire globalist media, entire mainstream media are in the thrall of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and the Bidens now. Right? Alongside the CIA, NSA, I mean, the same bunch of idiots, and they're not even useful idiots. James Clapper, and the man who one punishment, he should never be allowed to play poker. And anybody who promoted James Clapper needs to be retired with prejudice out of the system, because that guy's an idiot. And he's an incredible liar. And look at the people that are standing up now to, in theory, defend Biden. You have Mitt Romney, we'll get to him in a second. You have other people, Joe himself saying, these rumors have been debunked, there's nothing to them, I did nothing wrong whatsoever, nobody profited off the Biden name. What did Peter Schweitzer just write a book about, and multiple articles, and that we have the source, we have the sources. So we have the evidence. You can look at Joe Biden, what was your net worth when you barely graduated from law school? What is it today? How much did you make in 2016? How much did you make in 17, 18, and 19? How do you own two multi-million-dollar estates?
How did he pay $3 million in taxes?
Right, if he actually did that. And the other thing is, I mean, I know from 1980 to 91 work, they sat me down at Dillon Read and they said, listen, we know you're an honorable person, that's why we hired you, but we just want to explain something to you. Should you make the grievous error of deciding that you're going to trade on inside information, they said,
we'll shoot you.
No, it's much more, let's explain how it works. I mean, back then they said, this is how it works. You're going to go into a file because you're here at Dillon Read, and they're going to go back into your background all the way to nursery school, and they're going to figure out who lived next to you, who did you play with,
who does that, the SEC?
SEC and others. This is what they said. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know, and they're instantly pre-internet going to figure out, if all of a sudden your sophomore year roommate is making a lot of money off a deal that only you knew something about. They put two and two together really quickly. The other thing they did back in that time frame is for any deal involving mergers of public securities, the firms involved would have to construct a timeline, and it would go into the SEC of who was the first person at Dillon Read who found out about the possibility of this deal. On what date and time did it happen? What then did that person tell inside the firm, what was going to happen next? And they reconstruct this very strong timeline pre-internet to figure out what actually happened. Think what computers can do today if you let them investigate things. I know Comey and Mueller's job was like, there's a problem over here. We need to protect Obama and the Clintons, so don't go anywhere near the underlying crime. We need to cover this shit up and put it back, wherever they deposit plutonium. That's where underneath that is where we're going to put these secrets. So I think the notion that Joe Biden is qualified at this stage to remain as a candidate to serve as president of the United States is laughable, and the public understands this. I mean, it's just anybody who could put together a campaign this bad would be outmatched in a negotiation over water rights with Manitoba, let alone, in Canada, not to pick on the people of Manitoba, let alone, with President Xi and Vladimir Putin, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He couldn't negotiate to get a properly mixed Mai Tai out of AOC.
He barely got that soft serve ice cream yesterday.
I know.
He was like, I got it.
I've got two colors, vanilla and chocolate.
Yeah.
Didn't go to Baskin Robbins.
It's unbelievable, Charles. I mean, obviously the most stark contrast is that he's saying it's been debunked, and I'm just so disappointed in any people who I might know who actually see this on the news and buy it. I luckily have been encountering, just in the sphere of personal friends and family, people who are scratching their heads saying, well, wait a minute, why they've got this evidence of the laptop. The FBI says, finally the FBI says, well, it's not Russian disinformation. It's like the one thing in the FBI investigation file that's not Russian disinformation is Hunter Biden's laptop.
And it's just the same script. I mean, Adam Schiff said, it's Russians, it's Russians.
How does he have any credibility?
He doesn't.
That dude's a lawyer.
Liar.
But I mean, evidence and process and...
Nobody's buying it.
Out the window.
Nobody is buying this BS. You see it in the crowd sizes. I mean, I have actually been watching for a little bit each day snippets of the rallies, typically on YouTube.
Yeah.
And sometimes they pan to the entire crowd, but
it's huge.
These are massive all over the place. And as a friend was observing, apparently Phoenix and Tucson are not that far apart. So to do 2 rallies within 2 hours driving distance or so, and to get the massive crowds at each that the president gets. And frankly, it's almost like watching something that we've never really seen before. A president who is relatable, who is quick on his feet, who is hilarious, who is, I mean, he's really funny. And to stand up and interact with tens of thousands of people at his age, having been in the hospital only 2 weeks ago.
It's unbelievable.
And to have the presence of mind, you notice there are very few hecklers, and what should scare the living daylights out of the Democrats is something like, I just saw a statistic that in the recent rallies, 30% of the attendees are not Republicans. 30. I mean, and you don't see, with that amount of potential infiltrators, there aren't people throwing shoes at Donald Trump or anything else yet. Then, of course, this 50 cent thing. I mean, this was, I don't want to be 20 cent under Biden. That's pretty funny.
It's really funny. But the thing that's important about this is that, I mean, 50 Cent, whatever we think about him, he's not like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bishop Gators. He's not like a black intellectual conservative kind of guy. He's a real kind of mainstream popular entertainment figure. So he says this, I think a whole other section of people are going to pay attention to that.
Right. I mean, you have, I don't know if you have the clip of 50 Cent stacking cash into his Lambos when he was doing this, when he was talking about this. It's really very funny.
Really? Wow.
And he's talking about, and I just got off with it was a Zero Hedge story, I think. I just got off with my money manager, here he is, and he told me about the Biden plan. Wow. And he explains his opposition to the Biden plan while stacking bills into the trunk of a Lambo. That's amazing. It's pretty funny.
That's amazing. London-based 50 Cent Fund. Well, I don't know. I'm not seeing that. That's technical term for that, Charles, is stacking paper.
Stacking paper, or bill stack?
That's making money.
Yeah. But, I don't know there you go. You see with the bill stack? If you go down a little bit, you'll get to the video. And this is after a long discussion. Where's the video?
Who is that person? Biden wins 50, might want to buy a few more Lamborghinis to stow his cash.
Yeah, I don't know where the video was, but there was a video in here.
Well,
there it is. Yeah, look at that.
Oh my God. Small trunk in a Lamborghini.
Well, look, he fills the whole thing up with bills.
Didn't we see a Lamborghini SUV somewhere?
We did.
That.
We did over on 10th Avenue.
Put the bills in that, Charles.
Yeah. Well, he's got multiple cars.
I don't doubt it. I'm pretty sure he's a billionaire from vitamin water.
Yeah, and I think before that he went bankrupt.
I mean, he was
getting
shot for selling cocaine and all kinds of things.
That's a lot of cash right there.
Yeah, that's actually crazy.
Yeah.
How much is one wrap of $100? It's like 1,000 or 10,000 per stack?
I don't know. It's probably 50 bills as a bet, so it's probably 5,000.
That's a lot of dough, Charles.
It is. would create an SAR, a suspicious activity report for most Germans.
You mean stacking cash in a Lamborghini is suspicious?
Yeah.
Seems totally normal to me.
And hunters watch this going, I can do that.
But that's an interesting question. I got no issue with 50 Cent, but where is he getting all that cash? Is it he paid like by the bank?
I don't know, he walks in, he says,
I guess he's got to make it rain at the strip club and stuff. He's got a lot of...
I think he's got most of the incoming cash is a bet at this point. But unlike, so go back to Hunter. You broke some news, was it yesterday, with Hunter's signature?
Well, it was you and I together, and I definitely appreciate you giving me as much credit for it as you have. What happened was somebody sent me the article where they had brought out the receipt from the laptop repair place with his signature on it. And then I just asked you if you were aware of any documents that would have Hunter Biden's signature on them, and you had the presence of mind to check out Companies House in the UK, which definitely gave us the match here, which definitely...
Yeah, and let's just stop on this for a bit. We'll get back into this with our guest at 5, but Companies House is an amazing resource for anybody who's interested in finding out truth, and it's not very helpful to crooks.
Right.
So in England, unlike in the United States, private companies, that is, that are not publicly traded, have to register and report, including getting audits if they're not very large at all. So there we have two. I'm no signature expert. We have the one that was out in the press yesterday, and then we have the one I found.
Charles.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I mean, more or less the same. The squiggle is a little bit different.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of variation. Depends on how much crack he smoked that day.
But this and the RHB. Look,
I saw somebody took this elsewhere on Twitter and did like mark it up and say, oh, hey, CS The Truth found another document. And this person seemed to be an expert at identifying handwriting stuff because they were showing where it matched. But
so in the very first, one of the early broadcasts that we did the business model of charity fraud. And it's very similar to the business model of fraud, generally speaking.
It's just more charitable.
Well, no, in the case of a private company like this one, generally the people involved in a private company, private for-profit company, are greedy.
Yeah.
You know, they would like to earn a profit. So therefore, they don't take very kindly to managers or people in a private company who say, you know what, let's not tell anybody else about all this revenue that we found, and let's just steal it, but we'll run all the expenses through the company. Maybe they do that in Hollywood, and maybe they do that in real estate.
Maybe.
I'm just, and other deals. But in the main, people who are trying to earn a return on their capital are wise to that, and they count on the greed of co-participants in for-profit making schemes to hope that this money isn't siphoned off. Now, that doesn't stop fraudsters from doing it. I'm aware of a case that got a lot of attention in India. Big company, I think it was Reebok, had a national manager of the company. They made a lot of sneakers over there. And this genius said, nobody's going to check. So we'll just, we'll tell headquarters that we made and sold 1 billion pairs of sneakers when in fact, we're going to make 3 billion, and I'll just take 2 billion of them and I'll sell them myself and keep the cash and charge all the expenses to the company. That's something along those lines happened with regard to sneakers. So it does happen in for-profit world, particularly in international complex companies.
But when somebody steals money or does something greedy in a for-profit company, I'm not saying that's good, but at least it's not as dishonest as pretending to do something charitable just to steal the money. Like if a producer would screw me out of a few $1,000s on a deal, I was never surprised by that.
Right. Well, so in the not-for-profit world, it's the reason that I think the lesson we're learning now, that I first became acquainted with this fraud in February of 2015, and I've spent most of my life since then studying it in its wider twists and turns around many places on Earth. What you learn is, in the first place, the IRS doesn't police these charities. Even when you go to them and say, fraud, biggest ever, over here. And then the guys with the IRS are saying, no, how do we get a piece of this? But so in the first instance, the IRS isn't doing its job. In the second instance, states are perfect. They have these, Letitia James will go after her enemies, the Attorney General of New York.
Yeah.
But she's not going to go after the Clintons. She's not going to go after others, Republicans, Democrats. She's going to protect the Clintons, and she's going to protect Obama, and she's going to protect Eric Holder and other people like that, and Terry McAuliffe. So when you understand that, and you're sitting there as a criminal, and you've got the problem that 50 Cent has with all that cash, what do you do with the cash? You've got to turn it. If you go to the typical money laundering services, and I'm told by reliable experts that there are such services, that even now there are people who will charge you a fee to turn dirty money into clean money. And that fee, when I last talked to these two experts, is 21%. So you give somebody $1 million of dirty cash, they take $210,000 as their fee. Does that Epstein name come to mind, or and then suddenly you've got a $790,000 investment in Tesla or something.
I was going to say, it sounds like some of this pretty opaque stuff having to do with Wall Street and whatever might be a great way to make some of that money.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean that's like the episode we've talked about in the Sopranos. Remember that one?
Which one?
Tony had an investment. Tony and his team from the Bada Bing Club were controlling a Stratton Oakmont type firm, and they were pumping a stock. What you do is you take a company public, and then you have analysts write all these glowing research reports. You drive it up, and as it's going up, with dirty money, you buy the stock and you sell it at a profit and you turn it into cash. So then you get it all the way up here, and then you know it's going to burst, so then you start shorting the stock to make money on the way down. Wow. And this particular episode, it's actually rather tragic, but it's sort of funny at the same time. They had a problem with the research analysts who, on the way up in one of these pump and dump schemes, was doing a Charles and saying, this company is like GE, it doesn't make any sense. And so the goons arrive at this type of a firm, and they say, hey, so-and-so here, and up comes somebody like you or like me, polite, well-dressed, etc. And Tony says, or Tony's goon says, so you got to stop writing these research reports. And the guy says, no, I mean, the cash flow margins are shrinking and the return on assets are declining and this covenant is out of whack and all this technical stuff. So they take a baseball bat out and beat the living crap out of him. So there is that world, and that's a horrible world. But going back to charities, the trick is, and if you put back up the Hunter Biden signature page, the trick in charity fraud, I think the first trick is to find a gullible schmuck like Hunter Biden, who is trying to punch way above his weight. He should have never gotten into Yale Law School. He should have never gotten these jobs. Putting him on the board of Amtrak with the argument that he's ridden on Amtrak for thousands of miles. Well, why not? He probably I took the subway back and forth to Horace Mann from Greenwich Village for 6 years.
The whole MTA.
Yeah, the whole thing. When I'm 22, why not? I mean, I've ridden thousands of miles on the subway. It's ridiculous. And more often than not, what you're trying to do with these young people with dynastic political names is you give them more responsibility than they should have, and they tell their friends, I'm on the board of Amtrak and I'm in Rosemont Seneca Holdings with a son of a stepson of John Kerry and the Heinz family fortune, and I'll sign all this paperwork. And then after he comes down from a crack night or whatever, somebody takes him aside and says, Hunter, look, here's what you've done. When this scheme goes down,
you're in trouble.
No, it's all your idea. You're taking the fall for this. And not your father, and not your relatives, and certainly not John Kerry or any of these other people. And you get this dumb schmuck to go open bank accounts around the world for this company, for different charities. And the first trick in all that is once you get the account open, which is supposed to be difficult to do, particularly after September 11th, 2001.
Internationally, yeah.
Domestically as well. It's much more difficult than it used to be. In the old days...
Just to open a bank account, you mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a corporate bank account, you've got to show proof that you were organized. Does that sound familiar? And operated lawfully, and you're getting, if you need to be audited, that you're audited, that your papers, that you have a board resolution authorizing you to open the bank account, that you have officers and they've okayed it, and they'll double check it typically. The bank will then call up the names and say, this guy over here just gave me a whole bunch of paperwork. I want to verify that he is who he can show me a picture of him. And they can really, if they do their job properly, it's very tough to open up these bank accounts. So you get a schmuck like this guy, Hunter, or the chief financial officer of the Clinton Foundation, who is perhaps the worst chief financial officer in the charity world, bar none, because he's been at the center. He starts work on a note to the crowd: never start work on April Fool's Day. Always a bad idea, right? Even if you really have to do it, just say, I can't, I've got a doctor's appointment, I've got whatever reason, I'm starting on the 2nd. But this guy starts on April Fool because he is an April Fool. He's actually a 360 day of the year fool. And so I think too was Hunter Biden. So they in the Beau Biden charity thing that we talked about.
For the protection of children,
yeah,
while in the nude and smoking crack.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, I was putting together today, trying to prepare for this, looking at the recent stories, waiting for the big revelations to come from Bannon and Giuliani.
Which did not.
Which have not as yet, but we'll get back to that in a second. But what they did start talking about was how, and it's multiple places now, there's text of some discussion where Hunter is either talking to his father or somebody about how he had been telling his therapist, and generally if you talk to a therapist,
you're not
that's
supposed to talk about it, right?
Exactly. Well, you're also not supposed to take crack and
right.
walk around naked and FaceTime
exactly
with underage girls.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. While you're a member of the bar. I mean, what do you call a member of the crack house? I mean, it's
a crackhead.
Well, there used to be standards in the legal profession that when you start behaving like this, you can't be a lawyer if you behave like this. And so,
well, breaking the law should be grounds for being disbarred. But I mean, if that were the case, we'd have a lot fewer lawyers. Sorry, I don't mean to derail, Charles, but while we're talking about all this screwy accounting, there's been some big news among some of the emails and stuff, and even people in the crowd have broken this big news. Eric Hansen has resigned as the head coach of Arizona's swim teams.
I think that's a different Eric Hansen.
Oh, whoops, yes, that's the wrong article. I meant to bring up this one, that he's resigned, and there's a new chief operating officer of BKD.
Yeah, he was also the former chair of AICPA. Now, we gave Eric Hansen a chance. We it was Man for All Seasons, I think was the episode, and we did another one like that where we gave this firm BKD, and I'm sure at BKD there are many remaining high caliber accountants. Eric Hansen, I don't think, was one of them. And in my experience, when somebody who had been at the top of his game, I mean, to be chair of the AICPA is a very big deal in the accounting profession.
Sure.
In theory, accountants are among, the accounting credential, the CPA is among the toughest ones to get. And then you've got continuing education, and it's not for the faint of heart. If you're not good with numbers, you probably don't want to be an accountant. So for him to rocket into a position, Eric Hansen, where he's the chief operating officer of this BKD firm, and then on top of that, he's the chair of the AICPA, and we give him a shout out of these videos. Maybe they watch them, maybe we don't. We lay out in gory, graphic detail, in literally hundreds of slide presentations, the massive fraud from an accounting standpoint that the Clinton Foundation still is, always was, from a number standpoint. All the errors in the forms filled out. Remember, BKD is both the tax advisor for many years as well as the independent accountant. We lay out all their mistakes. We give Hansen a chance to correct the error of his ways and to force the Clinton Foundation either pull the accounting statements or engage in other activity that would distance the firm from the Clinton Foundation and turn around, frankly, and sue the Clinton Foundation. He didn't do that. So the fact that he's now
at the Mizzou game.
Exactly. The fact that the press release doesn't go on and on. The typical press release for somebody you like when they depart is, we're sad to learn that Eric Hansen has decided to concentrate his activities going forward in, basket weaving, and he's set up this foundation for Native American basket weavers and rug makers, and that's what he's going to spend the rest of his life doing. There's none of that. There's not, while at BKD, Hansen, in his role as chief operating officer, took the firm from using an abacus to using a computer system and made this improvement, and he was honored this way and that way, and he won this award and that award. There's none of that in that press release, which suggests to me that he got his took us, I think, is a phrase that some use.
Just give him the heave-ho.
Exactly. You could take your tiger and get the puck out of here.
So that was just yesterday, and interesting what's going on with all that kind of stuff. We've also heard a couple of articles about some of the people. You know, they say there's no evidence to some of this stuff, Charles, but I didn't hear them saying that. I didn't hear Twitter shutting down Adam Schiff for putting out all kinds of allegations without evidence. Now we've got people who are already incarcerated being moved from one federal facility to another. Perhaps that's to prevent them from having... Yes. And there was Devin Archer.
Right.
They overturned some... He's basically back in trouble. Like they said, oh, you're all right. And then they reinstated a conviction. That's what they did.
What I love is the way in which these goofballs, including Joe, who's just, he's not even a ball, he's just goof, tried this argument. Well, the Republican-controlled Senate issued a report in which they said that nothing untoward had happened, no crimes were committed, nobody was disciplined. And on top of that, here's a letter from 50 retired security experts, all on the pay of the Clintons probably, who say that this is Russian disinformation. Let's take the first piece of it. The first piece, the fact, as recently as several days ago, Ron Johnson has been pounding the table saying, God freaking damn it, I have been subpoenaing the Bush-led, Christopher Wray-led FBI and the A.G. Barr-led Justice Department for years to get information which I am entitled to receive as chair of the Homeland Security Committee, and I didn't get that information before we issued this report.
Wow.
So, to go down an argument as weak as that, confirms the idea that somebody with 47 freaking years experience as an elected politician would believe that the best way to close a gap or to protect a lead in the most important election on earth right now is to spend time watching his washer dryer go around thinking it's a television set in his basement. I mean, it's just this guy, he is not qualified to serve in an executive position of any kind. He's not qualified to run the French fry department of one Wendy's restaurant.
Well, to be fair, Charles...
Which is a tough thing to do, by the way.
Exactly. To be fair, I'm pretty confident that Joe Biden has a separate laundry room. He's got to keep this TV studio doing something. Here's a teleprompter we can see.
Exactly. And
Raise it up.
What does the red hat stand for? Is that Phillies?
I guess, yeah, the Phillies.
Why would somebody living in Delaware support the Phillies? He probably has no. I mean, why would you?
Delaware baseball team?
I don't. Probably, but not a major league one. That's Maryland.
Yeah.
But I
don't know. Delaware is one of those states where, like, what the hell is it? Pennsylvania, Maryland? It's sort of just in there.
It's an interesting state, but I mean, it's clear that this guy is not representing Delaware. He's representing Biden.
Well,
maybe that's a B. That he's just taken the.
It's just the bottom part fell off. P. It's pay for play.
That's right. Payola.
Pay me.
Exactly. You got PayPal. You got Pay Me.
Just really bad. Joe Biden is an absolute wreck.
And then we have, we could disagree with the strategies being taken now by Bannon and Giuliani to be as aggressive as they are, flooding the airwaves, promising that all sorts of stuff will come out. But Bannon specifically said, I am a student of Andrew Breitbart, and Breitbart explained to me that when you want to break a story like this, you bleed it out, you don't do it all in one fell swoop, and you give the other side, give the other side a chance to tell lie after lie, and then call them out. Yeah, and that's what they're doing here. And so I'm not at all disheartened by the fact that Giuliani was not on Maria Bartiromo this morning, but Mark Meadows was.
Did they explain why that happened?
I didn't watch it. I just noticed that Meadows is quoted as saying that that the Biden family has laundered hundreds of millions of dollars, and that it is a criminal enterprise, and Trump is demanding that laws be enforced.
Has Barr responded? Trump was finally speaking out, saying that Barr's got to do something. I mean, I've been saying that since the day they decided
Well, look who's writing this story.
Who is Maggie Haberman?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, Maggie Haberman has a very serious conflict of interest that I personally explained to her. Her father-in-law is a man called Vartan Grigorian. Vartan Grigorian is a rags to riches story who has had very many big jobs, and I don't know if he still is, but for a time he was on a big member of the board of directors of the Carnegie Foundation, which is the oldest foundation in America.
Is that Dale Carnegie or somebody else Carnegie?
Andrew Carnegie.
Oh.
And so it's a very prestigious foundation that gives a lot of money away, sponsored projects involving the Clinton Foundation. But most importantly, he, for some strange reason, Grigorian decided to go on the board of the Hunter Foundation, which is this Sir Tom Hunter, the fellow who got up at a Clinton Global Initiative meeting and said, I'm going to give $100 million to charity. Only he didn't have $100 million. And it turned out what he was really going to do is agree to give 10% of his future profits, which he had assumed would be $1 billion. And for that,
this guy?
Yeah. Queen Elizabeth decided to put him on the rich list. He palled up with Bill Clinton in 2006-07 timeframe to create the Hunter, it's either the Hunter Clinton or the Clinton Hunter Development Initiative, it's CHDI, Clinton Hunter Development Initiative, that has no, it was never validly organized or operated anywhere in the world. It's still out there, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I guess it's 2005.
Charles, you're the Clinton Hunter, as far as I'm
aware.
aware.
It says 2005 he announced. Okay, so President Clinton announces this. In 2005, there was no entity called William J. Clinton Foundation that was lawfully organized. It had no authority to do international work. It was operating illegally in New York City. This announcement was made in New York City. There was no Clinton Global Initiative. There was the first meeting that was held there. No part of this is legitimate. And for some reason, Sir Tom Hunter signs up and says, oh, that sounds good to me. Let's go do work together down in Africa. And by the time 4 years ago that WikiLeaks started dropping, there are quite a few emails.
Who's this, Charles?
It looks like it's Nelia Hunter Biden.
Joe Biden's first wife, also last name Hunter. Is she connected to the Hunter guy who's doing crooked deals with Bill Clinton?
No.
Nowhere? Cousins?
Interesting. That's very interesting. Look at that. She's born in Skaneateles. Here's another trick that we can do. Let's go into opencorporates.com. And let's punch in Hunter Biden in officers and see what comes out.
Opencorporates.com.
Oh, and she was married in the Bahamas.
What's that about?
Well, Biden always holds himself out as a coal miner, hard scrabble background. How did he have the coin to go down to the Bahamas?
He's a liar.
Right, so here, this is how I found the Enable and Invest UK, which was formed 11 April 2013. But look at these other companies, Skaneateles LLC.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, the significance of that, as a guess, and this is right after Hillary bowed out and formed in 18 July 2008. Very frequently, investors and now crooks will set up companies with innocuous sounding names that have some connection to their lives and use an LLC. As you know, LLCs and subchapter S corporations can be used to hold assets, and they're virtually impossible to penetrate if an outsider wants to.
Yeah, but you can sue them.
You can sue them, but the point is that if you had discovered that your father was going to be the Vice President of the United States round about 18 July 2008, and you wanted to set up
a bunch of companies to funnel money to.
Yeah, like here's how, and you would do it like in the District of Columbia, where again the District of Columbia is 90% pro-Democrat, pro-Biden, pro-Obama, and the regulators are never going to do anything. Now I don't know what Owasco PC is.
I think he just misspelled ayahuasca.
And here you have this Rosemont Seneca Advisors LLC. That is a company, that's the thing that was set up, I think, to work in theory with Chris Heinz, who does have lots of family money. And I haven't started to check, maybe people in the crowd could start checking. in FINRA, which is the regulatory body for firms like this, what do we find out about Rosemont Seneca Advisors? Might Hunter Biden be in FINRA? Maybe see another example of his signature. And then we have Robert Hunter Biden, manager of the Biden Enterprise LLC. You know, is that where he was driving out to Nevada in his rental car with his crack pipe to set that thing up? Remember that?
Must be.
Yeah. So this is something. If we had an actual FBI, I mean, you and I are just
Better than the FBI?
I'm not saying that, but you
discovering more information than the FBI.
It's not that complicated. I think the FBI, unless they're not paying their electric bills, they can
covering
do
fewer crimes than the FBI.
Yeah,
Let me keep going here, Charles.
They should be able to do a little bit of this, and be curious to see what.
Not raping employees.
Right.
We're better than the FBI in every regard.
And one thing that's actually pretty funny is, as I look at this, I'm aware of executive officer, but I've never seen the title executing officer. Executing officer and executing officer.
Wow.
What does that mean? Is he in charge of executing Biden family opponents?
I mean,
so that's pretty odd. Anyway, I know we have a special guest in a few minutes. I don't know if we need to dial him up.
Yes, let's try and do that. While I raise him up, you can continue to regale the audience here, Charles.
So you got these are the companies that we found out about. It is possible that he's listed under R.H. Biden or R. Hunter Biden. So we haven't gone to all the variations to try to figure out how else he may be in the system. And we obviously haven't gone to the level of trying to look around in places like Cayman and other spots where real criminals often go, and legitimate investors as well, to set up these types of companies. This is just one screening service, and there are many others that people could use, and certainly the FBI would be well able to take this farther, way farther than I've taken it. Because what the FBI can do is they can look into any bank account that any Biden family member had ever created and had any interest in, any securities account, any bank account, and then they can check and see, well, did you disclose, if they're foreign bank accounts, any of these bank accounts, that you had the bank accounts on the proper forms that need to be sent in by June 30th of a calendar year, tax filer. So I think Hunter and Joe are in a world of hurt right now.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Is he answering?
I'm just making sure right now is convenient to add. Yeah. And perhaps we just add.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to be bringing in former CIA analyst Larry Johnson.
That's great. He's been doing a lot of good work recently, commenting on various aspects of these frauds. There he is.
There we go.
Hey,
Larry, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Excellent.
I can't hear him.
Yeah. Oh, yes, right. Now you can, Charles.
Yeah, that's good.
There we go. Hello, Larry.
Hey, Larry. Are you in from the shooting range?
I am. Not having out there, but
do you have the shooting? Are those shooting glasses?
yes.
Now, before we get into this serious discussion, there's been a lot of mention that the former president, Barack Obama, was supposedly an avid skeet shooter. And I was wondering if you were the guy who introduced him to skeet shooting.
I was not. I would doubt, given his lack of athletic prowess on the golf course, because he used to play quite frequently at my golf course in Bethesda,
Really?
the Avenel, and the two caddies he used were the two caddies I always used. So they would always give me the lowdown on how bad he was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not much of a golfer. Tennis is more my sport, or skiing, but even I could tell just watching him as just a member of the public that he's atrocious, and why you would beat yourself day after day going back out of the golf course when you're that bad is sort of beyond me.
How do we have a minute or so?
Sure.
We're live right now.
IT guy.
Oh, we're live right now, Larry. Just if that wasn't clear, I wanted to make sure you knew.
Okay, hang on. I'll just step out.
Sure, no problem. So we'll come back to that, Charles. We can continue to talk about Barack Obama's golf
that's
prowess.
You know, not exactly the way competent golfers generally behave or allow themselves to be photographed, or for that matter, dress. I mean, it's kind of weird.
So we had, or well, I should say I had felt pretty early on that it was kind of likely that Joe Biden would either die or drop out before the election, and that Hillary or Michelle or somebody would come in. I don't know. I really cannot imagine Joe Biden carrying on. I didn't think he would make it to today.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him. He's like, his first cabinet meeting, he's going to go down to Lowe's in the kitchen section
Right.
and say, all right, here we are.
Oak.
Exactly.
This is the cabinet meeting.
Not that kind of cabinet, Joe. You know, oh, then he'll say, oh, he'll read up on cabinets, and then he'll go into his bathroom, because one of the old names for bathrooms was the cabinet room. And he'll sit there in the toilet and say, all right, I'm ready now. You know, this is a cabinet meeting, right? No, Joe.
Well, you know, Barry Jackson thinks that Obama would be good at golf because he loves playing with balls.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
That's a low blow.
That's our viewer saying that,
right.
not me. I'm just reading it. Barry Jackson, thanks you for the comment.
Yeah.
You know, Mike Moore was telling us last night on More Pain, Charles, that Joe Biden has a reputation around Delaware of, like, you're talking about cabinet meetings. He redid his kitchen. Somebody that Mike knows personally is a contractor, redid the kitchen in that massive mansion for like 40 grand, and Joe Biden just didn't pay.
That's outrageous behavior. Outrageous.
Directly stealing money from citizens.
Yeah, so you get your money, you're going to have to. So that's to abuse a contractor. Now, people accuse Donald Trump of having done that. Now, there's a flip side as well. I had a very nice home and had a lot of work done on it, and I was quite young at the time, and so this one contractor thought that they would take advantage of me and sent me a bill for putting in 11 acres of lawn, and then constructed the arithmetic for the bill using a pencil and then a pencil diagram and trying to justify a bill for like $25,000 off math that wasn't right. Wow. And I just said, this is absurd, because I already paid him like $10,000 or something for it. And it's just seeding a lawn. We're not talking about, heavy work. Huh. And so we had a big back and forth, and he insisted on bringing his wife to our house to, lecture me into paying him a bill. So we went into a formal room in the house, and I said, do you know what your husband did? And do you understand what he's trying to get me to do? Or what did he do? I took her through it, and she took him by the scruff of the neck and left the house.
That's amazing.
So you do have, when you
there's
have
some gray area there.
Well, yeah, it's natural. You sit down and your client's obviously got some coin, some bill stacks, as you were saying earlier.
Stacking paper. All right, we're back with Larry. Hello.
Sorry about that.
That's quite all right.
Totally okay. So we are live.
Okay.
Great, Larry. So you have been doing a ton of excellent work about both Biden messes and the Clinton Foundation, Obama messes, and we'd really like to pick your brain based on your decades of experience in and around not just Washington, but spycraft and other issues. Is Biden going to make it to Election Day?
I don't know. I'm genuinely the revelations that are coming out this week from Rudy Giuliani and based upon the hard drive. And so far, we've not seen anything from the FBI or from the New York Post to contradict that. So, what we know for a fact is apparently the New York Post has the hard drive, the FBI has the hard drive, and Rudy and his guys have a hard drive. So there are at least those three copies. If Rudy was making something up or putting something out that wasn't on those hard drives, he would be easily discredited. That would be almost suicidal, because the FBI could come out and say, oh, this could be disinformation because this isn't on the hard drive. Well, we haven't seen or heard that yet.
Right.
So what he has put out is just alarming, because it's not a simple matter of just Hunter Biden's squalor and depravity. It is the fact that Joe Biden is a lawyer. As an officer of the court, he was witting of allegations of behavior by Hunter Biden that was criminal, that involved a minor, and took no steps to counter that or to stop it and to report it. So that combination of factors means, and that information is now out in public. So that's out in public for the foreign, for Russia, for China, for every other foreign government around the world. If Joe Biden is somehow elected, he's going to start off compromised from the outset,
right?
Which means the pressure to get him to resign, if nothing else, it will give the more radical Democrats ammunition to compel his resignation early, because he would be up for impeachment. And these would qualify certainly as high crimes and misdemeanors.
Well, so if you would, talk to us a little bit about our viewers, maybe some of them have had top security clearances. I've never had one, never wanted one. Talk to us a little bit about how a crackhead would obtain, in Hunter, how he would be in a position, would he ever be in a position to get near classified material if he was a known crackhead?
He shouldn't. If that was one of the reasons he did have security clearances when he was in the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy, and then when he failed a drug test, he was dishonorably discharged. So he should not have had any once that was identified, he was deprived of continuing access to classified information. Clearly he's a disturbed individual. The reports that are now public about his activities with a minor, about his activities that are on video apparently with the wife of his brother, his sister-in-law, who I guess is, I understand, maybe the mother of that 14-year-old. It's just, it's appalling stuff. Right. And as Rudy's putting out the fact that there was a discussion between Hunter and Joe Biden on this very, very issue. So as those facts come to light, there's zero chance that Hunter would ever be in a position allowed again to take up a position that required access to classified information or any kind of.
Right. So you were very helpful, Larry, many times. But in that story that you wrote about, the State Department whistleblower who said that person had evidence of criminal activity, not simply by Hillary, but possibly by Obama as well, and talked about the interest in going into a skiff to talk with Comey himself or somebody at that level about the seriousness of the crimes. So how is there any truth, as the Dems have been saying, the idea that if you mishandle classified information without knowledge of doing so, that's an excuse? Or is that total garbage?
Yeah, that's total garbage. Yeah. So the problem Hillary has is that top secret information appeared on an unclassified server. So sort of the easiest way to illustrate how this is impossible is I'd like you to imagine that you're holding a salt shaker in your right hand and a pepper shaker in your left hand. How do you get the pepper into the salt without intentionally doing it?
It sounds a lot like the beginning of a rap song, but
the only way pepper shows up in the salt, let's say that the salt represents unclassified information and the pepper, black, represents classified information. The only way you can put the classified into the unclassified is by a conscious act.
Right.
Why is that? Because they're separate systems. They don't communicate. They don't interface. It's not like your email system where you can send from one account to another. These are actually separate. They're completely separate codes.
Right.
And so there's no way that you can accidentally put information into an unclassed server. It requires a conscious act. You have to either physically download it onto something like a thumb drive or a disk. You have to print it off and then scan it into the other system. But there's no way that you can just, like you do sometimes with text messages, you can accidentally send a text message to someone you intend to because you just didn't take care to make sure you had the right address. You cannot make that kind of mistake when you're moving information from a top secret server to an unclassified server.
Well, so I made the mistake of buying Peter Strzok's book. And the reason I did it is there's a section entitled Mid-Year Exam talking about his attitude on the whole investigation of mishandling. And the whole book chapter is predicated. His argument is, I couldn't convince my team to go after Hillary because she wasn't doing this knowingly or wittingly. Now, come on. I mean,
that's why. I mean, if that's the most ignorant thing he could say. I mean, if he truly believes that, it shows how unqualified he was to hold that job, because you cannot accidentally put top secret information into an unclassed system. And that was the point that whistleblower, the senior State Department Foreign Service officer, was making to Jim Comey, that you so graciously alerted me to. And once I saw that and read it and understood what he was saying, he was absolutely right. That information, the way it was presented and briefed to the secretary, you couldn't just do a copy paste from your laptop and put it into an unclassed email message. It was a deliberate effort. And that is by definition, the fact that top secret information is on an unclassed server shows intent by definition.
And recklessness.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, I went through really, I think, every single one of the Podesta WikiLeaks emails in 2016 as they were coming out. And one of the things I did notice is a trait in people slightly older than me when it comes to the internet. They tend to ask their assistants to print out their emails. Right. And because they don't want to look at a screen, their eyesight may have issues, and they want to be able to pore over it the way we used to do decades ago. And I saw a large number of emails in the WikiLeaks Podesta dump addressed to either Oscar Flores, who is the butler at the Chappaqua estate, or people like him elsewhere, where it would say at the bottom, print this. Then in the various books that have been written, who's the fellow, the name will come to me in a second, who wrote Unlikable, the New York Times guy who's a real character, writes books based on inside information, Unlikable, Ed Klein. A number of his books discussed how it was common practice in the Chappaqua House and maybe down in D.C. for government papers to be lying around on coffee tables around the house. And then at the same time, if you have crooks seeking influence with either Barack or Hillary or Bill or all the above, you invite them up for brunch and you leave some plan on the table that the person really shouldn't see. That's straight up mishandling of classified information, corruption, and worse. And
but isn't that fairly commonly done, Charles? I seem to recall a Cy Hirsch interview where he says that was how he got the information that he revealed about the Millet massacre. He went into some guy's office and the guy pushed a paper across the desk and said, "I'm going to the restroom."
Yeah, I asked Larry about it. I don't know.
Yeah, that was how it was. It was the report that had actually been filed, or the testimony of the individual that was at that point being hidden. So it wasn't like a top secret document per se, but the military at the time was using classification as a way to hide information.
So is it the case, Larry, and I obviously don't want you to answer a question that you shouldn't answer, and you can deflect if you want to deflect this, but is it the case, or is it possible, that when Donald Trump was elected, when the Electoral College met, that the internal outgoing members of the Obama administration decided that they couldn't allow Donald Trump to see material that ordinarily should be seen by the highest elected official in the land? And is it possible that they may have adjusted the national security classification system to park a whole bunch of incriminating evidence in digital or other boxes that would be very hard for Donald Trump to see in his team? Is that possible or fanciful?
It's possible up to a point, but I do know individuals that have access to these most highly classified, they're called SAPs, special
Right.
access programs, and that's one way you can hide this kind of information. The problem Trump faced coming into office was he had no experience in this arena, and as such, he was not surrounded by a group of experienced people as well who understood how the intelligence community worked, how classification worked, how special access program systems were used to obscure information and to hide information. He had a fairly steep learning curve, and I think learned belatedly that things were being kept from him. And as we've seen, the FBI engaged in just a strenuous effort to stonewall investigations, not just on the Trump front, but related to Trump. Carter Page, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos. They were lying, hiding information, and withholding it. And then here again, they've had this laptop computer and hard drive with with damning information, both text messages, emails, images, videos, as well as photographs, since last December, and would not have ever spoken a word about it had that hard drive not been put into the hands of Rudy Giuliani and his team, and then they began to exploit it and to go through it and start cataloging what was on there and to figure out how, a strategy for presenting the information.
Right. Well, how did the FBI have this laptop starting, I think, in December of 2019,
Right.
and sit on it? How did they do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know how they got it.
Yeah.
When the father of my friend, Colonel McIsaac, who's retired Air Force colonel, after discussing with his son, and his son was concerned about, he'd seen some of the information on his hard drive, and he thought, this should be in the hands of law enforcement. And his father said, yes, you're right. So he approached the FBI office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he lives. And he was met by an agent. The agent was at best hardly interested in what he had to say, but then did ask for a copy of that work order that Hunter Biden signed. Mac went out to his car, retrieved it, brought it back into the FBI office. They copied it. They kept a copy of it. And then basically they tossed him out. He felt, abused, not treated with any kind of respect or concern or interest. And so he walked out. This was mid-September 2019. And then they don't hear anything until he gets a phone call in November from the FBI, two FBI agents asking to speak with his son. And he's like, well, why are you asking me? My son's a grown man. He's 44. You call him yourself, which he did. Then that led to the FBI calling his son, JP. And JP, when they first came to him, he tried to give it and said, here, take this. I don't want it. He wasn't out trying to sell it. He wasn't looking for fame or fortune or notoriety of any sort. He was just trying to cooperate. And it took the FBI 2 more weeks before they came back with a subpoena. And it turns out that subpoena is issued in the name of a grand jury. We have no idea what the grand jury is meeting for. Yeah. So from that point on, it's grand jury material, and it's sitting in the FBI's control, both the computer and the hard drive. And one has to wonder, why didn't they at least alert the White House to the fact that there was exculpatory information with respect to Ukraine, or corroborating information that, in fact, the Biden family was was involved with a behind-the-scenes business deal with the Ukrainians, and there was a specific request to shut down any prosecution of Burisma, and which Joe Biden ultimately played a role in. That's specifically in one of the emails that was just released this afternoon.
Yeah, this whole Ukraine story, I had the privilege of going on about 12 to 15 business trips to Ukraine between April of 2010 and call it April 2012, all over the country. And it's a fun country to visit. I don't know if you've been there, but
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Sure. So the United States under Bush, and maybe before that, when as the Soviet Union was breaking up, long had cast covetous eyes on Ukraine, and it's got a history, probably better than I. It goes before 1066 AD. It's been important to various incarnations of what is now Russia.
Right.
And these people who work in the globalist mainstream media just don't want to set the table for us to explain exactly how and why did Viktor Pinchuk, who was married into one of the leaders of the country's families, how and what was he doing, and why, beginning in 2004, was Viktor Pinchuk contributing money, supposedly, to the Clinton Foundation to fight HIV/AIDS in Ukraine when the Clinton Foundation didn't exist lawfully anywhere. How did that start? How much money went over there? How come they're listed as giving $10 to $25 million to the Clinton Foundation? Why is Doug Schoen working, the Fox News guy, Monica Crowley, why are those two people working with Viktor Pinchuk? Why did Viktor Pinchuk decide to contribute small money to Donald Trump's operations? I mean, it strikes me that to figure out what's going on in Ukraine, what happened with the reset, you've got to go deeply into the context. What was the United States doing? What did we promise in 1992 as the Soviet Union fell apart? What actually happened? Which oligarchs were funded by the U.S. and are pro-U.S.? Which other place? You would have to go through all of that and examine all the fortunes that have been built out of the former Soviet Union and how much of that money leaks back. And I think when you do some of that and tease it all out, then what's been happening from 2016 to the present will make a lot more sense. I don't know if you share that view.
Yeah, no, actually, I think it's really all about the money that was looted, not only from Ukraine, but from Russia in the 90s, that made its way into the coffers of people in Washington, D.C. And that's where all of the I'll call it the fabrication of the mafia tale that, you see early on in this whole Russia influence thing, accusation against President Trump, the name Semyon Mogilevich popped up as this Russian mafia guy. Well, actually, he was born in the Ukraine, and he's a citizen of Israel. But, apart from that, yeah, he's Russian. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And when you go back and actually look at what he did, there's not a lot of evidence of actual kinds of the massive criminal schemes that we've seen associated with people like Pablo Escobar or El Chapo. In fact, he was, I have no doubt that he was involved with some fraud up in Canada and securities fraud. But he's a far cry from being this guy who was having people whacked right and left. But what was really going on is that a variety of the K Street lobbying firms, law firms, were lining up to represent a whole variety of Russians and were becoming rich in the process. There was just a massive capital flow. And I know of that firsthand because my company, Berg Associates, we were initially hired on the whole Bank of New York Russian money laundering case. We did a lot of work on that. In fact, I'm sitting here with all the files from the bank records from the multiple banks that we received files from still, 22 years later. So it's the money. The money is the key to this. And money going into the Clinton Foundation is not an incidental. I think it's a critical factor in telling this story.
And really, we're going to start seeing more of this, I think, in coming days. But I also think Bill Clinton, either alone or with coaching, decided that his buddies, Tony Blair, other former leaders of the richer countries, might be able to emulate his example. And that's why you have the multiple Blair foundations, and you have European leaders have foundations, African leaders have foundations. Nelson Mandela's foundation, for example, has been exploited. And this is a whole area that cries out for example setting, for aggressive prosecution. Do you have any hope, assuming Trump is reelected, do you have, and that the economically literate wing of the Republican Party gets control of the House and keeps control of the Senate, do you have hope that examples will be made here, or do you think this is all going to be swept under the rug?
No, I think actually if Trump wins re-election and the Republicans retain at least the Senate and even win back the House, then that's the only scenario I see in which there's hope that this will be properly investigated and exposed. Otherwise, if President Trump is not elected, they're going to cover it up best they can. But the problem is now this information's out there and it's going to be used by foreigners effectively to blackmail and to coerce and to control. So, the American people will be the ultimate losers in this.
Yeah, well, let's hope there's some enthusiasm. What do you have, Jason?
Well, now, Larry, when we see this document, it's amazing, I think, to Crowdsource the Truth viewers that there's just been zero evidence of Russian collusion presented, yet so many people believe that. And every day we've had this really tangible evidence of something pretty seriously wrong with the contents of this laptop, however they came about. And you mentioned the grand jury subpoena. So are we able to surmise anything from this? It's a grand jury impaneled in Delaware. Seems like it would be investigating the Bidens. And I mean, they're not going to just impanel a grand jury, or would they, based on this laptop? I mean, is there anything we can glean from this?
That I don't know. It is
dated the 9th of December, 2019.
So that's in close time proximity to when the FBI would have gotten the laptop.
Yeah. So that the subpoena was put into his hands apparently on that day, the 9th or the 10th, and he immediately complied with the subpoena.
Oh, so he gave them the laptop in response to that subpoena, you're saying?
Yeah. He didn't have a lawyer at the time advising. He was just, he's a Joe average citizen just trying to do the right thing and cooperate with the FBI. See, the other thing here is if he had lied to the FBI could come back and charge him with lying to a federal law enforcement official.
Right.
Well, they've not charged him with that because he didn't lie. He told the truth throughout.
That's unless the people doing the lying were the FBI, in which case you get promoted.
That would be the usual case.
And this, what's so laughable about this claim by, proven liars, demonstrated liars, Clapper, Brennan, Hayden, that they insist that this is somehow some sort of Russian meddling. And it's like, how is it Russian meddling? Just explain that to me. So the Russians were not the source of the email messages. Those have been validated. The messages and the videos and the images and the text messages were all generated either by Hunter or to Hunter from people that he was associated with. So, that's not Russian interference. There's zero evidence that the Russians delivered the laptops to the computer repair guy. Hunter signed the work order. the phone number and email for Hunter, that he was alerted to the fact that his computer was ready to be picked up were his, didn't belong to the Russians. The owner of the repair shop in Wilmington has had no affiliation, interaction, knowledge of anything Russian. His father, a retired Air Force officer who actually worked some in the intelligence community in a military liaison capability. He's certainly not a Russian agent. The decision to approach the FBI was not made at the direction or behest of Russia. The decision of the FBI to seize the computer and the hard drive was not the action at the behest of the Russians. So just explain to me, where is the Russian interference? The only interference we're seeing is from Twitter and from Facebook and from most of the mainstream media, who are doing everything they can to try to quash the story. That's the only actual meddling and interference that's taking place. So that, I don't know if they're Russian or not, but regardless of Zuckerberg's ethnic history or that of Jack Dorsey at Twitter, whether or not they're Russian, they certainly are meddling, and they certainly are trying to interfere and suppress the information.
Now, is it possible? I mean, I suppose anything's possible. We know that the real story, I think, or we surmise the real story in 1516 is that the Clinton people conspired with the Obama people to make sure that Bernie was not the nominee. They liked the idea, I believe, of Trump. They thought they were going to smash him with the October surprise. That didn't work. And they thought they had this whole thing sewed up. So they concocted this tale, the Russian conspiracy. They've been using it. Is it possible that, or what percentage possibility might you assign to the theory that this is a hit against Joe Biden, designed to maybe force him out and replace before the election?
That's possible. I think it's, I think Rudy's goal, and I have not talked to him, and he's not consulted with me. I don't have his phone number or email contacts, but I'm just surmising that, this is designed to hurt Joe Biden, and it really does hurt Joe Biden. The question is, will it suppress votes that people who would otherwise vote for Biden, or will this engender sympathy for Biden and ensure his election, at which point it then provides the justification to get rid of him as a candidate?
Well, so you've been very generous with your time, Larry, and we have just a few more minutes. I want to ask, back in 2008, down here where we are right now in Manhattan, in the particular portion of Manhattan where we happen to be, a little bit further south where I live, is really the center of the hard left rich. I mean, and so in 2008, the townhouses everywhere, in almost every window along every block, there was either an Obama sign or an Obama Biden sign, and people were dancing in the street.
Well, lost the sound on you there. Hello. I lost the sound.
We should be back now. We should be back now.
Yeah. So
I don't know what happened.
People were giddy in anticipation of the result. Everyone expected an Obama victory. And in this particular area, where it is safe to proclaim that you're a lefty or a progressive or a Democrat, because, I mean, this is Gerald Nadler's district where I live. So it's pretty safe to put a Biden sticker on your car, or a Biden pin on your jacket, or a Biden placard in your window, and there's nothing. And then you look, and you look. I don't know what happened today with Obama's thing down in Philadelphia. How many people actually showed who were not paid by the SEIU or somebody else? The enthusiasm gap here is massive between the Trump venues and the Biden non-venues. The most damaging thing that I've seen in reporting, which I believe to be true, is that in the most recent Trump rally, something like 30% of the attendees are not Republican. 30%. And there's been, let's hope this stays, there's been no infiltrating, there have been no serious events where anti-Trump people got in and made a fool of the president. What's it like, and we don't need to identify exactly where you are, but in and around where you are, you're closer to Washington, D.C., or maybe you're not actually now, but are there many signs up for Biden that you see?
Yeah, I'm actually down in the heart of Trump country in Florida, just south of Tampa.
Oh, okay.
So I'm in the Sarasota, Bradenton area, Sarasota County, Manatee County. Huge Trump support here, huge enthusiasm for Trump, and signs everywhere, as well as cars driving around with flags for Trump. You see an occasional Biden-Harris sticker, but they're more, it's like spotting a unicorn. So it can be a rare event. But this, I agree with you on the enthusiasm front, and it is, I think one of the wild cards in this that the professional pollsters have not picked up on is that people who are moving into Florida are fleeing some of the Democrat blue state area. I sat in on a pistol class, a basic pistol class with a couple. They were in their late 60s who had just moved here from San Francisco. And this demure woman, appeared very distinguished. I said, "Oh, you left San Francisco. Why?" And I'm quoting her. She goes, "It's a shithole."
You have to pronounce that one properly. Well, the way we pronounce that on this show, it's a shithole. Yeah. That way you don't get in as much trouble.
Well, just real quickly before you go, Larry, a lot of people are aware of things like Operation Mockingbird. We've never seen something so naked as this Twitter removal and the suppression of the New York Post thing. I know, you've been out of the CIA for a while, right? What do we know about Operation Mockingbird? Does it continue? How is the CIA manipulating things that people believe are news?
No, I wouldn't credit that to the CIA. They get entirely too much credit for a level of competence that they've had trouble displaying over the years. Their incompetence is the very fact that you had John Brennan at the head of it tells you everything you need to know. But I think it's far more insidious than that. You don't need an actual government agency when you have this form of political incest which takes place in Washington, where between the media and between certain Democrats, that there are marriages, intermarriages, and then the law firms and the lobbying firms together. It's gone from what used to be called an iron triangle to it's a Roman orgy of corruption is what it is, and they're just blatant in wanting to coordinate and stomp out any Republican who dare speak. But see, and this is the other dynamic that's at play here. They've not hidden their cards on this at all. They've been very upfront about what they're trying to do. And the animosity expressed towards Trump voters, Trump supporters, is they're not hiding that either. Is that the rant that Keith Olbermann went on last week was just epic in terms of stupidity.
Crazy.
I mean, where you're basically talking about wanting to round people up and put them into re-education camps. Well, average people, they understand that, and they understand, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to say what I'm doing. I may even lie to you. I may even pretend that I'm going to do something else. So there's a large number of people out there supporting Trump that haven't been counted, recognized, or identified because they're keeping a low profile. But at the same time, in spite of those threats, in spite of the perception of danger, you sure got a lot of people that aren't afraid to come out, make the declaration, and go stand in line in cold weather and rainy weather and in wind and stand there for hours in order to get in to stand up for another couple hours to celebrate Donald Trump. You're not getting that with Joe Biden. He makes the corpse and Weekend at Bernie's looks lively compared to Joe.
Yeah, and I mean, he tried to build some enthusiasm, leaking out the last several days. He said, what I'm going to do, some important cabinet level positions I'm thinking about. I want to make Hillary Clinton Secretary of Defense, and
What?
Andrew Cuomo Attorney General. Yeah, I mean,
What?
that's like
Joe Biden said that?
some people close to the Biden campaign are floating that trial balloon.
Andrew Cuomo, Attorney General.
Brilliant. I mean, why don't we just bring, I don't know if Al Capone was buried or incinerated, but let's bring his corpse back to life and make him Attorney General. I mean, anyway, is there a publication or site that you write for that you'd like us to expose?
Yeah, my site, Son of the New American Revolution. It's sonar21.com.
Sonar21. Let's pull that one up. There you go. And you also, I think, are regularly featured many different places.
The Gateway Pundit.
Gateway Pundit.
And at Sic Semper Tyrannis, Pat Lang's blog.
All right. And are you on Twitter, or you don't mess with that?
I stay away from that. I go on Facebook in true name. I did several years ago I had a Facebook name that I got from Navy SEALs. In a training course we did for them, we had to call them up by name, and they wrote this name on the board. It's a French name. The first name was Haywood, Heywood. Yes. And the last, Jableauxme, French, Jablomi. So Haywood.
I'm familiar with that guy.
That was crude.
Yeah. People will be looking that up on Facebook later, Larry, for sure. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your day. And we will speak to you soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
There you go. Excellent. Now, I forgot to tell our friend Larry that there's he's hung up, so no problem.
Good.
Well, there you go, Charles.
Yeah, he's a very knowledgeable guy, a good writer, and he dives into complex issues and analyzes them, and then writes for various platforms, gets picked up.
I didn't get to ask him if he knows Kevin Shipp or Robert David Steele.
Maybe do that offline.
Next time, yeah. So, well, Charles, we've covered quite a lot of stuff today. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about? No,
I think we could perhaps give a shout out to Katerina Blinova.
Oh, yeah.
Who you just did an interview with, and I've done another one with. And she really is a prolific writer. English is not her first language. It might be her second, third, or fourth language. And to the people who have not yet decided that they're willing to look at this information, which is put out by Sputnik and then translated in many languages and sent around the world. What Katya does, and she's an independent historian actually, by training, medieval historian, what she does is she seizes on a set of questions and she'll send them to me or to you, Jason, or whatever, and I suggested with you that it would be best if you just had a chat with her on Skype or something, and then she could put her stories together that way. In my case, I prefer answering the questions, writing them out, because then I have a record of what I actually said, and I can edit what I may have written. But what she does is she asks a series of questions, normally not just of me and others, and then does her own research and weaves together these fact-based articles and interviews that allow people to really dig deep if they want to, or just look at surface level if that's what they prefer. And she and I have been doing this together since May of 2016. So in my case, there are well over 100 interviews, not simply on the whole Clinton Foundation and charity fraud stuff, but on Russian relations with various countries, including the US, on what's going on in Iran, on my views on this and her views on that. And I commend these interviews. Yours was, I thought, very well done. A lot of good information and what just came out. And folks might consider following Katya, because she tweets out, it's Blinova14, I think, on Twitter, at Blinova14, lowercase b, Blinova. So there's that. I've also been doing a bunch more on American Thinker, And I am honored to, frankly, be included in American Thinker. There are a lot of people who are excellent writers, and I'm learning from them, and there's a fantastic editor there who runs the whole show. And now with so much information out there, I'm in a process where I'm trying to pull it all together and point the massive pressure against the weakening defense links supporting the Clinton Foundation and protecting those who operated Obamagate and continue to try to protect the former president. I think the Death Star has a chink in it, and I mean, like a small hole or whatever.
Yes, that got somebody fired from ESPN.
Right. And I think it's time for those of us in the crowd and those of us who have evidence to apply pressure on the Death Star. And I also think
you just got to shoot it right in that exhaust valve. It's bigger than a womp rat.
All right, there you go. But the point here is that it's taken a long time. I remember a Norwegian journalist, when I related this tale to him last year and described this, and this is years into the process, said, well, Charles, if you're right, this has to be one of the biggest conspiracies of all time. It's like, bingo.
Yeah.
And so,
got it.
So on the one hand, I think that we're starting to see the picture. A wide group of people are starting to see the picture. Indeed, on Brett Baer's 6 o'clock panel the other day, a couple days ago, I think, there was a woman who worked for the Cook Report, which is a political consulting operation, and she described the two most significant things that cost Hillary Clinton to lose in 2016 were her mishandling of the emails and
her entire political career prior to that.
No, and the Clinton Foundation. Those were the two things. And at the time when I was pushing on the Clinton Foundation in 2016, I didn't really hear a lot of people saying that in the time. But I think as history passes, we see that definitely was the case. And the people who had been protecting the Clintons and benefiting from the pay-for-play influence trading have been doing their level best to make sure that this story doesn't actually get fully exposed in front of prosecutors and grand juries, et cetera. I think we're past that point, and I think we've been in a zone now for some time, particularly with the 50 Cent revelations, the surging support among undecided, the support among Asian American, African American, Hispanic Americans, and then people characterized by Hillary as deplorables, and then the vast number of economically sane people, which I think constitutes a majority of this country, as people who thought they would be protected grow to realize that there's no shade and you ain't going to be protected. I think one or more of those people have already been talking to the powers that be and will start ratting if they haven't already started ratting out. And once the rat process accelerates, then we're going to have health emergencies. Various and sundry people will have health emergencies. And it's questionable whether people at the very height of the food chain will actually go to prison, but people are going to go to prison. It may be Andrew Kessel, the CFO, it may be one or more donors, it may be lesser figures, but I think even if Bill or Hillary were to have a health emergency and one of them pass away, somebody within the Clinton family is going to pay a heavy price here.
Chelsea.
I don't know, and it's possible. Our French friend Fabien sent me an email noting that Chelsea Clinton has actually set up yet another venture capital fund called Metadoro or something like that. I forget the exact name. That somebody as crooked and I would argue as nasty and arrogant as Hillary and also Chelsea Clinton, that she in this climate could get a venture capital fund together is so far beyond the pale as being ridiculous.
Just absurd.
It's completely absurd. It has to be laundering dirty money. It has to be questionable activities. And that's an area we'll do after we get done with the Clinton Foundation. There are lots of areas like that we can look pretty hard at.
After we get done with the Clinton Foundation, there's not going to be anything left. Chelsea Clinton, I'm also very interested in what she's doing over there at IEC. You know, Charles, AMP, M, VH1 Radio, UHF, whatever this person's name is, brings up a good point, says Biden is like a clone of Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was really in a lot of trouble with this Billy Saul Estes scandal and did a lot of stuff with shady land deals and sending that sort of stuff to, the land that they built.
Cable TV, yeah.
Well,
I mean TV, really.
Yeah, the land that they built the Houston Space Center on was worthless, like desert type land purchased from Lady Bird Johnson.
Yeah.
So that's amazing how that works out.
Yeah, I wonder if the Clintons thought about that when they put the library together.
But isn't Joe Biden's career going back far enough that that sort of temperament in Congress was like, this is how we do it, son? And he's come up, maybe it's still happening.
Well, I'm sure it's still happening. I mean, people in the real estate business, reputable people, explain to me that if you, the reason you would make a contribution, a lawful contribution to somebody like Alan Hevesy, pick somebody who's in prison, the New York State Comptroller, who himself could decide who got money in pension funds himself, with no other people involved, which is a very stupid approach, because you're talking about pension funds in the hundreds of billions of dollars.
Wow.
If you're a developer and you've got an attractive parcel and you want to put up a building and you don't have an anchor tenant yet, and suddenly some branch of the federal government needs a third of your building and will give you a 30-year lease, and all you've got at this point is an idea and some plans, that's, you just made a gigantic fortune on paper, because you've got all the collateral you need
Guaranteed
to make sure that the thing is actually going to come together. You have a tenant that will always have dollars to pay its lease obligation. They may not be as valuable as they are today because of inflation, but that's there. And it's a far easier thing, depending on what the agency is. It's a far easier thing to then rent that building. I mean, all the
To
space of the
everybody.
building. Yeah, if you have that leg up. So government and the private no-bid contracts that Obama and others and Bushes were giving out for all sorts of things, they can really turn somebody who's not worth that much money into a multi-billionaire. So the intersection of politics and money is a swamp. And it's just gotten to the point where, the water there's no water left in the swamp.
It's just like solid mud.
It's shitholi.
Socked in there.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, it's been another great show. We're going to have a lot more to talk about. People are saying that the Wall Street Journal is going to drop stuff tomorrow. We're still waiting for Rudy Giuliani's next drop and all that. I'm going to have Larry Klayman joining me for a special show tonight to talk about some of these legal questions that we have. I meant to ask Larry this, if there is underage, porn or whatever it is that's alleged to be on this laptop. A lot of people have seen it and sent it around and copied it and sent it to different people, and there's a legal question as to can you do that? And Mike Moore was saying he felt that the feds would try to jam these guys up. Always happens. We'll see. We'll talk to Larry tonight at 8 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for watching and remind people that they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth on subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. People wanted us to walk around, but it was a little overcast today and we wanted to speak to Larry. Maybe Sunday. I don't know if we have anything planned for Sunday yet, but perhaps if it's nice, we can walk around. I'll see everybody later tonight. Charles, I'll see you Sunday.
All right, great.